Hello and welcome to this special presentation of Tate Thomas Presents The Evolution of Eternal Curse. In this video, I, Tate Thomas, will talk about the evolutionary process that my up-and-coming Tate release of Eternal Curse Giovanni's Angel has gone through to make its way into the general public and hopefully into your hearts and home. First, I will begin by talking about the dream. This whole book and experience began with a series of recurring dreams about a gray man. In my dream, I saw an awkward yet powerful-looking man with gray skin wandering through life, hiding in shadows and constantly longing to be understood. I felt as if this gray man had secrets he was trying to hide, but because each day when I awakened, I couldn't remember much of the dream, the secret eluded me. One day, I decided to start taking notes about what I could remember, and each morning when I woke, I would jot down more. Over time, I eventually crafted a very sad story that ended quite happily with my gray man transforming into an angel. He'd simply forgotten who and what he was. After that, I began to develop a story that was inspired by the dream, but told quite a different story and ended even more differently. In my dream, there were only two characters, the gray man and an old man. I felt that the old man was probably a caretaker to the other. This similarity is carried over into the book, but so much more has been added and changed. When I first wrote what eventually became my book, I had no intentions of actually writing a book. After sharing the story idea with a precious few, I decided I wanted other people to read the story and fall in love with my title character the way I had. It was also during this time that I began to envision a symbol engulfed in black that had no real meaning to me until the second draft of my story. This symbol would eventually make its way onto the cover of my book. Starting out, all I wanted to do was find a way for people to read my book. The idea of being a published author was almost foreign to me. I wanted my book published just so my friends and family could see it. I had no idea what I was in for. The first edition of this book was the realization of a dream come true that spawned a small nightmare. But that's a story for another time. Let me just tell you about the book for now. When I first published Eternal Curse Giovanni's Angel, the story was very basic. There were details and background, but much of the heart of the story was missing. When I had an opportunity to publish it and thought I was getting a great deal, I didn't realize that deal came with a quickly fading timeline. I thought I would have more time to develop my story, but alas, I did not. So, the initial story was very simply this. Girl meets boy online and a friendship is formed, though neither have revealed their full identities. Girl is a doctor who wants to help boy, but boy has many secrets. After boy falls for girl and she feels he's a little creepy, he then decides to reveal his secrets. After she gets over the initial shock, she thinks maybe boy isn't so bad. But really, there is a whole lot more to the story than just girl meets boy. Giovanni is the main character. He is the gray man. He hasn't changed much from one edition to the next, but his overall story has improved due to more development. Mira is the other main character. She has changed quite a bit. In the first edition, she was very simply smart and a little unemotional, mainly because she needed more development. Abraham is another very important character, and he doesn't change a whole lot, but again, his story is enhanced by added details in later editions. The original cover of this book still holds a special place in my heart. Here it is. It's a bit mirrored for you, and I'm on the back. And it looks a little dark. The symbol is drawn in grayscale on the black background, and it's very hard to understand, but also hard to forget. People still tell me now that the symbol, stood out to them when they stumbled upon my book, which I think is good because it leaves an impact. Um, you can learn more about the symbol on the cover of this book by checking out my ebook, 40 Days and Nights of Eternal Curse. I wasn't trying to become an author, so after some not so bad, and some purely naive experiences with publishing, self-publishing, vanity publishing, and even blogging, I decided to start from scratch and give the whole experience another try, using all my mistakes as a foundation to build upon. When I became an author instead of just a writer, it completed me, and I haven't looked back. The second edition of the 90% self-published release of Eternal Curse, Giovanni's Angel was an emotional experience for me. I'm not physically comparing this book to a living, breathing child, but putting my second edition together is probably the closest I'll ever get to the emotional feeling of childbirth. It was hard, it was scary, painful, and emotional, but it was also wonderful. Working so hard to put something like that together just so that other people can hopefully love it, or hate it, or praise it, or bash it, or completely overlook it, or maybe even seek it out. It is an ache that keeps me up many nights, but I would totally do it all again. In the second edition of this book, all the details I wanted to add to the first one finally made it onto page. There is a much clearer picture of why Giovanni's childhood is so bleak. There is a much clearer picture of the struggles Mira overcomes to become the successful woman she is now. The reader even gets a better feeling for walking around the acres of Giovanni's home, Sinclair Manor, and how it affects the people living there. I even do a better job of explaining why my villain is a villain and how exactly he affects the overall story. As I mentioned when discussing the story, there are many more details involving other characters in the later editions. Leo, for instance, isn't a major character, but in the first edition, he seems to literally just appear on the pages as though he had been there all along. Issues such as this are finally resolved in the second edition because I was finally able to devote the time to it I had originally desired. Readers also received brief yet vivid descriptions of many more supporting characters, allowing the story to feel more real. With the second edition cover of Eternal Curse, Giovanni's Angel, I really asked my artist to kind of give me some help with this. He had drawn some pictures for the interior of the book, not like a picture book, but just some things to kind of add a highlight to the book. And so on the second edition, we decided to put Giovanni on the front cover because I wanted it to focus more on his struggles and his grayness. But that doesn't mean I abandoned my symbol. It appears on the spine of the book and on the back of the book next to the blurb. So the second edition cover was really more a collaboration, and I really like it. When I finally released my second edition, I did so with every intention to go forth and sell as many copies as possible. But being a no-name author with no following and barely existent resources, my dream seemed more like a child's wish for a good bedtime story. It was a lot of hard work, and looking back with all that I've learned now, I could probably do it again and do it so much better. But I'm not necessarily opposed to using publishing services or even working with a traditional publisher. Who knows what the future holds in this regard? The third and hopefully final edition, but don't hold your breath, release of Eternal Curse Giovanni's Angel will be distributed by Tate Publishing and Enterprises LLC. There is so much of the publishing process that was taken out of my hands when I signed up with Tate, but like any mother, some things were harder for me to let go concerning my baby, while other expertise was greatly welcomed. The story has not changed, but it has been enhanced. The editorial team at Tate assisted me with small but impactful alterations that made the overall story flow much better and even made some of the characters more likable than they already were. Mira is no longer simply smart. Now she is rational while having a few moments of pure emotion. She is a fully realized and understood woman with very few contradictions. Many long passages of narrative have been transformed into personal dialogue between my main two characters. Again, this is all in efforts to make the story feel more human and realistic. Okay, so here it is, the cover for the third edition. This is actually a proof, so the final product will look a little better than this, even though this isn't bad. While I do like the current cover, I really didn't have anything to do with it other than to veto some very odd background issues, some coloring, and even some spacing issues. This is one of those matters that authors and publishers will never agree upon 100%, but hopefully they can come to an understanding. My symbol is no longer on the cover, but it is inside the book, and it's revamped, and it will appear in a lot of my promotional material. I want people to read my story because it changed my life, and I think that it could bring a little bit of joy to someone else. I'll be the first to admit that on the surface my story won't appeal to everyone, but I think that more will like it after reading it than won't. Then, of course, there are those people who hate certain kinds of fiction and begin to read them and like to review them just so they can bash them. I don't understand that. But I'm not really worried about those people. I'm mainly concerned about the people who will like my book. I think it's a pretty good book. Eternal Curse Giovanni's Angel releases worldwide on February 18th, 2014. It would be available wherever books are sold, so even if your local bookstore doesn't have it stocked, they can easily order it for you. Right now, I'm doing pre-sales, offering a discount which ends on January 27th, so if you're interested, act now. I, Toy Thomas, am now available for personal appearances, both live and virtual. No venue is too small or too big. I would love to talk with you about my books. You can visit my website to find out more information about this and more at etoythomas.com. 40 Days and Nights of Eternal Curse, the official companion guide to Eternal Curse Giovanni's Angel, is a quick, fun, and informative little read that lets readers get into my mind and see if what I'm offering is something they could be interested in without a big financial investment. Currently, my little companion guide has only received one review, though it has been downloaded over 150 times. Author M.C.V. Egan calls the book an intimate look at the process of writing a novel. Then she states, Angels and Demons are far from my usual read. This guide also serves as a way to endear me to these characters in a way that I am now curious to see more in depth through Eternal Curse how Miss Thomas used all the tools she so generously shares in 40 Days and Nights. 40 Days and Nights also breaks down the spiritual aspects of Eternal Curse, and it clarifies and answers questions. To any who ask, I'd always say, yes, this book is based on Christian principles because that's how the book came to me. I always remind people that this is a work of fiction and is meant purely to entertain, which 40 Days and Nights clearly reiterates. Anytime someone is unsure if my book is what they are into, I point them in the direction of 40 Days and Nights, and so far the results have been pretty good in my favor. This year, 2013, I received a very humbling recognition award from the lovely people of theauthorshow.com. I have been named one of their 50 great writers you should be reading, and with that, I am moving forward with my creativity and have published 2 ebooks outside of this series and have no plans of stopping there. For anyone anxiously awaiting this book, or who have read some of my samples, or who may have even been lucky enough to be a beta reader, there is definitely more to this story. The second draft of Book 2 is complete and ready for editing. There are 3 full chapters and a complete outline for the third book, and there are so many other paths and avenues the characters of Eternal Curse can take. I do hope you will join me on this journey. You will learn the secrets of Eternal Curse and see what unfolds in the life and times of Giovanni. So now I would like to share a sample of Eternal Curse, Giovanni's Angel. I am going to read from a section of the book that's fairly into the action of the book, and it's kind of leading up to something that's about to get interesting. It had been almost 3 weeks since Giovanni had actually tried to sleep. It had been about 3 days since Mira had returned home. Though Giovanni was tired, he was more afraid to sleep. He wanted to close his eyes and think of Mira, but he knew that wasn't very likely. His dreams were never very happy or sweet. Giovanni assumed that it was just another part of his cursed existence. With Mira gone from sight, Giovanni felt haunted. In every room of the house he could still smell the lingering aroma of her scent. His only hope was to escape behind the locked door of his secret room, but that escape was little comfort to him at the time. He lay there in his bed, staring at the alarm clock Mira had left behind. He missed her so much, and he didn't even know why. He had brought the clock into his room to add some temporary illumination and keep him company in Mira's absence. He convinced himself that she'd eventually have to come back, even if it was just to get her alarm clock. Deep down, he knew that this whole notion was silly, but he just wanted to keep himself hopeful. Giovanni had never needed any kind of a nightlight before, even as a child. The plain fact of the matter is that if you can see in the dark, you really don't need a nightlight. After staring at the glowing numbers of Mira's alarm clock for about an hour, Giovanni finally began to drift off into a deep sleep. Thank you.